unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome and good evening. It's Wednesday night, and as always, you can send your friends a camel emoji and say, it's hump day. Well, I guess it's hump night. There's a camel with one hump and a camel with two. You're welcome. People are going to love you. Quick update from my cat, Tomato. He had a rough day. Vacuum cleaner. You know how it is. Let me tell you about tonight's show. I'm sure you've seen friends and family get fooled by an obviously AI-generated image. Something with 6 fingers, or melting furniture, or shadows that don't quite line up. To you is obvious, but to them, not so much. Well, according to cognitive psychologists, research suggests that we are wired to be fooled by AI. It would seem we're all susceptible. The reason? Our brains were designed for survival, not for Photoshop detection. Ridiculous experiments were performed on people, and they missed things like catching the gorilla in a group of people. Why? And what can we do to not be fooled? That we'll cover halfway through the hour. Then, we'll look at how mindfulness amongst people who have opioid addiction and cravings really works. It can help them feel joy again. That's according to a large-scale study. So if you or anyone you know is suffering from addiction issues, or you're curious how this all works, that'll be a little later in the hour. All right, we got a great show and someone very special to kick it off with. Let's dive in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
He's the only man in late night radio who has his own theme song on an evening show that airs with a host named David Cooper. His name is Tony Five. He's our foreign correspondent in London, England. Tony Five, welcome.
Good day, David. Good day, Canada. Hope you're well. Hope life is treating you well. The king is still alive. Trump is still president. And I am still bald, David.
Those are the 3 main updates for North America and Europe, I would say.
I would say most of the Western world, David. How are you?
I am good. Yeah, I'm feeling great about tonight's show. I'm feeling energetic. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and then I had a good day anyway, which is like, you can't ask for more than that.
When you say wrong side, what happened? Did you just feel a bit moody or angry, or did you literally get up on the wrong side? Did you crawl over Miranda and fall like next to the bed?
No, I was on my side. It's a metaphor, Tony. I was in a foul mood.
I mean, what side do you sleep on? Let's drill down on this. What side do you sleep on?
I'm sleeping on the north side of the bed, and Miranda's on the south side.
Do you face McDonald's?
I don't. Well, there's a McDonald's a little bit south of here, so technically Miranda's McDonald's facing.
David, so dear listener, if you have never heard me before, my aim in life is to throw David off his professional prime. You'll hear these silences that he'll more than likely cut out so don't make him look like a lunatic, but he'll get very confused with me, as will you, but you're not getting paid for this, so it doesn't matter. Carry on, David.
You're an official foreign correspondent on a national radio program, so, I mean, you're about as legit as it gets, Tony.
Really?
I don't know. Oh, waking up on the wrong side of the bed. So
yes,
I get up. I'm in a foul mood. We just got window treatments. I don't know why they call blinds window treatments. You're not treating the glass. It's just a blind. But we got blinds for the kitchen, finally.
Wow.
So I walked out of the bed in my birthday suit. Do you have that idiom in the UK?
Oh, yeah. You sleep with your winky out, don't you?
I sleep. You got to do it. I can't be encumbered by clothing while I sleep.
Does Miranda sleep?
She does sleep with her winky out as well.
So you both sleep with your winkies out? That's so weird. What would happen, though, if you, I don't know, get a burglar or an Amazon delivery in the middle of the night?
We have had a burglar, and Miranda confronted him before me because I'm like, I got to get my clothes on. But that was back when I was drinking. Miranda put a stool over her head and she rushed the burglar.
Right.
And he was just a junkie who was unwell. And so he was scared of her. She had a chair over her head. Keep in mind, she's like 2'8" and she's like 4 pounds. No, she's maybe.
And naked.
She was wearing a bathrobe.
Oh, okay.
She keeps a bathrobe and I do too for quick,
For burglars.
For emergency or fires or burglars, whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, I go to the kitchen. I'm not wearing clothes and I want to make myself a morning coffee. And she didn't clean the coffee machine the night before, so I did, and it was still a bit wet, so I had to wait till I couldn't. Yeah. So I was a little annoyed. Not important. I dry it off. I make my coffee. I didn't want to wake her up, so I closed the bedroom door.
Right.
Because the grinder, the coffee grinder makes noise.
Can I just stop you there? Dear listener, this is this is prime content for us.
I mean,
David making a coffee naked. So carry on.
It doesn't get any better than this, which is not sort of a euphemism for this is great. I just mean it does not get better than this.
It doesn't get better than this. Carry on. Again, wonderful name for a radio show.
Yeah.
It doesn't get better than this.
That's Tony 5 is here. We call this program The Last Show, or It Doesn't Get Better Than This.
Correct. Carry on.
Now, I'm in a foul mood. I'm just like unhappy. Mm-hmm. I'm angry with her about this coffee machine. I shouldn't be, but I am.
Okay.
And she did laundry the night before, and so she was hanging up her T-shirts on a clothes hanger on the inside of the bedroom door handle.
Double.
That's where our privacy lock is, okay? The coat hanger presses in the those little thumb locks? They're not real locks.
Okay, yeah, all right. Oh, yes, I understand what you mean. Yeah, okay. So
yeah, it's like a bathroom lock, not like a key lock,
No, I understand.
So the coat hanger presses in the privacy lock. When I close the door, I'm locked out of the bedroom with my winky out, as you say. And it's like 7 a.m, because I get up early to work on the show, whatever. And I'm upset, and I try to get a toothpick to pick the lock. I couldn't do it, and then I wake her up, and she's like, "Why
do you think you are, MacGyver?"
Yeah,
you got a toothpick to try and pick your lock. Brilliant. Carry on.
You can open a privacy lock with a toothpick. I mean, if you know what you're doing. I clearly don't. And she's just like she's so mad at me for waking her up. She's like, "I want to sleep," and I walk away from that, and I take a deep breath.
Right.
And the rest of the day goes well. I was set up for failure, and I just focused and tried to ignore the bad mood and sit with it. And here we are.
How did you spin that round? Did you just say, well, it happens? And you know when you argue with Miranda, does it go nuclear and then die down? Or is it like passive aggressive? Do you just kind of forget it, or do you just get it out? I see that you two are like, what are you, millennials? You like to talk about everything and then maybe talk about starving children in Africa at the end of it. Is that what you guys are like?
I don't know about the starving children part, but we've both been to a lot of therapy, so we both are very good about stopping ourselves. Like, we both have the impulses to get into a dysfunctional argument. We had wonderful role models of dysfunctional arguments growing up. I won't name any names. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Clara and Richard. I won't name any. I mean, I'll name 2 names. No. That's it. Just 2. Also, my brother John. 3 names. I'm just going to name 3 names.
Yeah, basically the whole Cooper family, but no other names.
And most of the families that we've married into, and cousins, extended.
Oh, your ex-wife and stuff.
Ex-wife. Yeah, I'm not going to name any names.
No. Basically everybody you've known apart from me.
Yes.
So I'm really passive. I'm like I'm a rollover dog type thing, yeah?
And so since we've been to a lot of therapy and we both have these bad impulses, we both are very good about catching ourselves. So we usually walk away, but we don't rudely walk away. I won't slam a door. I'll be like, "Love, if I continue this conversation, I'm going to get too upset, and I don't want to get too upset. Let's continue it in 30 minutes. I'm going to the other room."
Do you know how vomit-worthy that is to someone like me? It's sickening that you're not highly dysfunctional and you would break up there and then and make up maybe the next day over a coat hanger. It's unbelievable.
I've been divorced. I've been there, dude. I've been divorced and not going to talk therapy and not medicated for depression and mood swings. I've been there. It's not fun, and I don't want to go back there.
Well, maybe in the next segment when we speak about it, I'm talking about trying to find a therapist again, and I'm kind of worried about restarting it because I'd seen one for a long time. But that's content for another day, David. But
in true foreign corresponding fashion, when we come back, important news. Tony's provincial news from London, England, or just England. Tony,
it's actually from Germany, baby.
That's what I said. News from Germany. Give me a little tease of it, Tony.
Eins fein bedein.
That's not. Tony 5 is here. We'll be back.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The last show ahead of the curve in reverse with Tony 5.
Tony 5, our foreign correspondent, is here. I am David Cooper. It's Tony's Ahead of the Curve in reverse. Tony is a tastemaker when it comes to new technologies in reverse, which is to say he doesn't understand old technology, and so we're going to talk through old technology. Tony, welcome to the show.
David, wonderful to be here. A reverse Luddite, as you call, right? I identify as a Luddite.
I forget how we came up with this segment. I feel like you came to the show excited about like pagers or something. And then you were talking about being ahead of the curve. And I'm like, yeah. In reverse.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, God damn, these things, they can send you like seven words. All you've got to do is call up another person to give you these like messages, and it will send it in about 20 minutes. This is great.
And then like 505 means SOS, you know, because the
Yes.
5. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you about why I love New York City. Not far from where I live, like downtown, way downtown.
Okay.
There is like an old repair store for electronics. Like if you have a VHS video camera or a tube television or an old amplifier or like an analog telephone, there's a whole store that can somehow afford rent in downtown New York.
Fantastic.
And they sell old telephones, old televisions, like nice ones that the guys fixed up. How does this place exist? Also, it makes me want an old CRT tube television that like you couldn't pay to get rid of, and now people are like coveting because like old technology is cool and vintage and artistic.
Completely agree. There's one like that near me in Letchworth, and it has phonograms. It has stuff from before the war that these guys somehow fixed.
What is a phonogram?
I have no idea.
We're going to find out the breaking news as Tony's ahead of the curve in reverse. Sometime Tony will explain brand new technology in reverse, the phonogram. What is it?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like a record player, I guess.
All right,
but it's like really old with the big horn. You know, like the old like record players that have got a huge horn. It's like HMV, that sort of HMV style design with a little dog that looks at it. Do you know what I'm talking about at all?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Not important.
Brilliant.
Tony, you're a foreign correspondent on a radio show. You have to talk important breaking news in Europe, or otherwise we're like going to lose our license to broadcast, you know?
And listeners, David. We're going to lose our listeners. Forget about the license. It's all about the listeners, baby.
Listener, singular intended. What is the breaking news in Europe for Tony's provincial news? The news everyone needs to know about that's important for their lives.
David, I want to put you somewhere. You wake up in the morning.
Please don't.
The paper.
Please don't.
Come through your door.
Please don't. Don't put me anywhere.
You look at the heading.
I'm happy where I am.
You look at the heading.
I'm happy where I am.
And the main headline is Flying Duck Caught on Speed Camera Could Be Repeat Offender.
Repeat duck offender? Okay.
Not that it's just been caught on a speed camera, but it's been a repeat offender, David.
And where has this all gone down?
So this happened in a place called Konitz near Bern in Germany.
Oh, lovely. Bern, Germany. That sounds very, I don't know, violent.
Well, technically it's Switzerland, but, you know, same difference.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, and it was...
There's a lot of Swiss Germans after the war, if you know what I'm saying. Like, there was a lot of Germans after the World War II. I don't know why I said the World War II. You know, who needed somewhere to go. The country was decimated, and who knows what they did during the war. And then all of a sudden, there was one too many Swiss Germans. Oh, I'm Swiss German. I'm not German.
David, I feel you've veered off the overwhelming crime.
Into conspiracy theory? Yeah, I have.
Well, it was this duck was doing 52 in a 30.
52?
I mean...
miles. That's miles, people.
No, kilometers per hour.
Oh,
He's doing 50. It was 32 miles an hour in an 18.6 mile an hour zone.
What is so boring? Maybe I don't need to answer this. It should be self-explanatory. Why is it life so boring in a Swiss town that maybe is also a German town that they need to report on this?
I have no idea, but apparently why they said that is because they checked their speed cameras yearly and they found these two ducks. But officers believed the similar looking duck could be the same. So what they had is like a duck expert who watched this duck break the speed limit and came to the conclusion that it might be the same duck. And that's pretty much like the same time my mum thought a fly was following her.
For years, the same fly.
For like the same fly. She said, I think it's the same one. And I was like, it's 3 years apart, Mum.
Is this like relevant to bird experts, or it's just they got nothing better to print, or maybe both?
Well, I guess it's just a local paper and it's just something to put on a... I don't think a lot happens in Bern in Switzerland, you know?
No, they got the Swiss cheese fondue. They
Swiss
got
rolls?
Swiss rolls. I don't think those are Swiss.
Roger Federer?
They got Swiss chocolate, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Swiss watches?
Swiss franc.
I'd never heard of Frank. Is that Bob?
There's a Canadian fast food chain that has very little to do with Switzerland called Swiss Chalet.
Oh, what does it sell? That sounds crazy.
Chicken. It's like roast chicken, which I don't think is like a traditional Swiss meal, but it's like chicken and fries, and it's like a sit-down chain, and it's actually pretty good.
Is it good food?
I feel like I'm giving them free advertising on the show, which is fine.
No one's listening to the show, and nobody who listens to the show has got any money. So basically, you've got, no problem. That sounds really good. What else are the Swiss famous for? I can't really think. Swiss
gold,
like you said,
banking, like, you know, not maybe. Maybe they changed this, but you use, if you were like a criminal, you could go like open a bank account and be like, here's $1 billion, and they won't ask you where you got it, kind of thing.
And no, like safety deposit boxes and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Like fancy resorts and stuff like this, like in the Alps or something.
Ski resorts. Yes, Swiss ski resorts. Which is no. David, you've forgotten the most important thing about Switzerland. Their neutrality.
Oh, yeah. Neutral.
I don't want to play anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick a side. I'm just going to sit on the fence for everything. That's what the Swiss are famous for.
Do you think it's because they're too scared they'd lose?
I don't know, but they've got the Swiss Army knife, David.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, that bad boy will take out anybody.
Do you know what they call it in Switzerland?
Just an army knife. Idiot. I mean... I can't believe there's radio stations like paying for this junk. It's just absolutely god awful. Do you know what? I'm only here because I've just recovered from a serious illness. You know, that's the only reason I'm here.
This is the best we can do.
This is the best we can do. We're going full circle. Always, like I said, jingles first, content last. Speaking of which. To listeners that don't know, David's previous place had opposite his flat, he had a sheep that lived in a cemetery or a church. I can't remember exactly. Was it?
Yeah, I lived in an apartment across from a church, and my girlfriend was always very anxious when I talked about it because she's like, I don't want these listener, singular intended, to know where you live. But the church, from maybe like, I don't know, every year, it's a thing. From every year, from like maybe July to November, just before Thanksgiving, you didn't get a chance to see them. They have sheep in the cemetery next to the church. And it's very strange because it's in downtown New York, which is like not a place for a cemetery, but, you know, who knows?
Or sheep. Of course they would have a cemetery. People die. Why would they have a sheep there? Oh, you picked the oddest thing not to have in Manhattan. Like, I just couldn't work out, like, why you said that. I was hoping you would say sheep, but, you know, carry on.
Yeah, no, you're right. Anyway, long story short, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I had a neighbor who was a genius troll who was playing on his loudspeaker every 15 minutes, but then they would be different bahs. And so I'm like, this guy's a genius. He's got like a 1,000 sound samples and he's trolling the whole neighborhood. And then and I'm like talking about this on my show and I'm convinced there's a conspiracy. I get Miranda, my girlfriend, she's there. She hears it. I've got corroboration on this. And then finally, like 2 or 3 weeks later, I look out my window and I see a sheep. What's your question?
Well, for someone who's in computers, didn't you just fancy Googling sheep Manhattan?
No.
You would have got it so quickly.
The idea that a real life sheep that would be in like on a busy street in New York was just so outside of my like reality that I didn't even consider that it was real sheep.
New York is insane to me, and I'm from London, and every time I've been, something's odd. Like, your rats are getting exponentially bigger each year.
They are.
And less afraid of humans. I'm sure one of them pulled out a switchblade on me last time I visited you. But again, I'll see you this year.
Perhaps they brought out an army knife because the rat was Swiss. Tony, what a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Coming up next, have you seen a family member fall victim to a deep fake image? You look at it and it looks just a little bit off, but to them, they thought it was real. Well, you weren't the smart one and they weren't the dumb one because we are hardwired to fall victims to images like this because evolution. An early human being would probably only want to glance at a bear to realize, I should get out of here. We'll dig in with a cognitive scientist after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The Last Show with David Cooper, where we utilize non-linear reverse, inverse, backward thinking protocols. It sounds like this.
Have you ever seen an image online that felt a little off? Maybe the hand had too many fingers, or maybe the lighting made no sense, but you didn't notice it at first. Maybe you were fooled. Well, according to my next guest, a cognitive scientist, that's not you being dumb or careless. That's your brain wired to think that fake images are real. She works at the University of Richmond, and her name is Dr. Arryn Robbins. Arryn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Why are AI-generated images so good at fooling us? That's what I want to dig into.
Yeah.
It seems like we're all susceptible. Why? Is it that our brains are designed for survival, not Photoshop detection, maybe?
That's exactly it. So our species evolved to process the environment for survival. We wanted to be able to make quick judgments about what we're seeing out in the world. We didn't really have time. Our species didn't really have time to sit around and think critically about what we are saying. And so in our modern society, that sort of looks like us missing out on details. So when you are scrolling through your phone, looking at your favorite social media feed, you are trying to obtain the gist of what it is that you're looking at. You know, you're trying to think about, does this look familiar, or what is happening in this picture? Your brain isn't really wired to look critically at the details of what it is you're looking at. Our default is to move quickly through the environment, right? And so for us to look at a picture and notice details, especially errors in AI-generated images, it takes effort. And a lot of us don't think about doing that on a daily basis, especially at the end of the day when you're trying to doom scroll through your phone or something.
Sure.
You want to just kind of hang out and take it in and not spend effort looking for details, if that makes sense.
It does. The way I dumb it down for myself, and maybe you'll correct me here, is your brain is very quick to match the pattern. It says, okay, that's a person's hand, and then it moves on to the next detail.
Exactly.
And that's kind of how we process our environment. Otherwise, we'd be extremely slow as we navigated the world, and our ancestors would get eaten by a bear if they were extremely slow.
That's right. Right. Very much.
There's this cool video online. I fell victim to it, and most people do, called the Invisible Gorilla Experiment.
Yeah.
I think it's a good microcosm or analogy for what happens when we look at AI-generated images that are obviously fake but kind of look real. Walk me through this silly experiment. It's such a fun video for people who haven't seen it.
Yeah. So this is a video online on YouTube that was called the selective attention test. But what it is really doing is trying to induce what's called an inattentional blindness. So this phenomenon that we all experience where we are so engaged in something, we miss something completely obvious that's happening right in front of us. So with this particular experiment, you're watching a video of people who are passing a basketball back and forth. You are told to count how many times the players in white pass the ball. And so you're watching this video, counting the passes. About halfway through the video, it's just a few minutes long, a person in a gorilla suit walks through the middle of these players passing the ball. So you wrap up the video, you're asked how many times was the ball passed, and I don't recall the exact number. But then they'll ask you, did you see the gorilla walking through? And about half of people will report that they didn't see it. You go back, you rewind the video, and sure enough, a gorilla walks through right in front of you, right in front of your eyes, and you don't register it because you are so focused on the task of counting the basketballs.
I think it's a perfect example of how we can not see the details that are right in front of our face when we're not looking for them.
Yep.
I remember getting in a fight with someone who showed this to me, being like, there is no gorilla, I insist. Of course, we replayed the video. There was the gorilla. I looked like the idiot that I am. But I think that's what happens when we see AI-generated images.
That's right.
When we do spot something a little weird and a little off, though, is this instinctual? Is this a gut feeling? Or is it more like we have to be looking? We have to be vigilant?
Usually it starts, it's a kind of a combination of both. So part of it is your gut feeling. We are so good at identifying faces, people, and objects in our world. And you think about, I don't think we really stop to appreciate how skilled this is that we do this. We see objects in a variety of lighting conditions from different angles. Some are covered up, but we can still say, that's a pencil, that's a cat, that's my best friend, even though they're turned around from us, right? And so when we look at an image and something feels off, it's usually like our brain giving us a clue, like, wait a minute, stop for a second, like figure out what's going on here. And it's sort of like when you're watching a really bad, like old movies with CGI and you're like, oh, that doesn't seem right. The same thing can happen with AI generated images. You're looking at it and you're like, something's off about this. So you need then to take that extra effort to look for those clues. And if you really know what AI is bad at, then you can look for those specific details. So it is a combination of like gut instinct, but also taking the time to think carefully about what it is that you're looking at.
My ears just perked up. What are the things AI is bad at right now in generating images? I feel like this is a good, going through a list or having some key things in mind here can maybe help people who fall victim to photos that aren't real.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI is still really bad at text. So if it has words on it or numbers or symbols, if you zoom in, you're going to find it's a bunch of gibberish. And so I in this article I wrote recently, I was talking about how in the interior design space or tiny home space online, they would show these gorgeous rooms, but you zoom in on a clock or you zoom in on a poster and the symbols are just gibberish, right? So that's a big clue. AI, when we talk about humans being generated in images, it's still not very good at some of the details, famously hands, right? It'll add extra fingers or the fingers look distorted. Things aren't symmetrical in a way that they should be. So you look at ears, you look at hands. Shadows, yeah, that's a key one. Yeah. So shadows are a good one. Eyes, face, eyes are really hard to do. Getting the reflection right is really challenging for computers. And then repeating patterns. So if you think of anything that is repeated, so again, going back to my example with interior design, if we're talking about tiling, so tiles having a repeating pattern,
wallpaper, things like that.
Wallpaper. You zoom in and it has a hard time doing that. So there are these little clues. Things tend to be brighter. So colors tend to be more vivid than in natural life too. So yeah, those are sort of the big things I would recommend people looking for when they're trying to spot those little errors.
Unfortunately, these tells are getting worse and worse, which is to say they're getting better at fixing these tells. But for now, these ones are there. If we are this bad at spotting fakes casually, what happens in high stakes situations? Like when I'm processing an important news article that may generate a strong political opinion, or maybe an opinion in a courtroom or something like this. Like, should we be worried that AI images sway our opinions or have the ability to?
That's a great question. A big conversation everyone's having. Any time you can get training in media literacy in general, right? So you're thinking of, where does this information come from? What is the source? What is their motive?
Not me, I hope. Please keep going.
Yeah, not you. No, of course.
I mean, like, I hope people aren't getting their news from me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, of course. Completely trustworthy. Putting that into practice with images too, right? So anything that you're looking at, having a moment to think, where is this coming from? Does this feel right? Especially when the image is connected to high stakes information, political information, health information. You might want to stop and think, does this image match what I'm looking at? Does it come from the same source, a reputable source? So all of that, media literacy training should also be in effect when we are looking at images or videos online.
On a personal level, have you ever been badly tricked by an AI image?
Of course. I feel like we all have, but we also don't know, right? So it's like,
yeah,
here we're talking about attentional mechanisms that we all have that have limitations in the same way. So even as an expert in visual attention, I'm sure I, fall victim to all these things all the time. So we just don't know.
Well, Dr. Arryn Robbins is a cognitive scientist at the University of Richmond. Arryn, thanks for joining me today. This was a great chat.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Up next, opioid addiction. What if the secret to treating it isn't just cutting cravings, but helping people feel joy again through mindfulness? Might sound a bit new age, but it works, according to science. How? And what to know about it if someone you know is suffering? That on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
What if the key to treating opioid addiction wasn't just cutting cravings, but helping people feel joy again through mindfulness? Well, our next guest is a psychiatry professor at University of California, San Diego, who spent over 20 years developing a therapy that does just that. It's called mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement, or MORE for short, and it may help rewire the brain, reduce cravings, and help people reconnect with their lives. I'm here with Dr. Eric Garland. Eric, thank you for joining me.
David, thanks for having me.
What exactly is mindfulness-oriented recovery enhancement, MORE, and how does it differ from regular mindfulness or regular therapy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So MORE actually unifies three great traditions within psychotherapy. So mindfulness training, cognitive behavioral therapy, and positive psychology. And it weaves these components together into a treatment that can simultaneously address addiction, emotional distress, and chronic pain. And that makes it pretty unique because it's tackling all these three problems at once.
Is the combination of these three techniques sort of greater than the sum of their parts? Is it just that it's the three best techniques for the job? Tell me more about how it works.
No, that's true. It's definitely a synergy. So MORE begins with a foundation of mindfulness training, which is really an approach to cultivating the mind, mental training, a way to strengthen self-awareness and self-control. And then once you've developed some self-awareness and self-control through the practice of mindfulness meditation, then you apply those capacities to increasing your ability to reframe negative thoughts and stressors as opportunities for growth and personal meaning. And then finally, the MORE therapy moves toward the technique of savoring, which is really what this new study is all about. And savoring is the practice of focusing your attention on what is pleasant, beautiful, and good in everyday life, and then using mindfulness to appreciate and to extract all the joy and pleasure that could be derived from an experience that is happening in your everyday life, like a beautiful sunset, or the smile on the face of a passerby, or a bird singing in a tree, a flower growing on the side of the road. Really, I would say taking in the good and just sucking the sweetness out of life, so to speak.
There is a trope in TV and movies that feature characters with drug addiction. Let's take a harmful substance like heroin. And I don't know how true it is. I don't know anyone who's suffered from this, but like they say, once you try these drugs, once you fall into certain types of addiction, the ability to receive joy is completely sucked away. The drug is the only provider of it. Again, these are media portrayals. I don't know how true they are. But I think there might be some truth to losing some ability to feel joy from simple things, like you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So why does addiction do this to our brain, and how does MORE sort of reverse that?
Yeah, great question. So this is a pretty well-known phenomenon in addiction neuroscience. And we know from decades of studies that addiction hijacks the brain's reward system and basically teaches the brain to come to value the drug over the natural healthy rewards that the person once found pleasurable and meaningful. So the people, the activities, the values they once cared about, those things stop activating the brain's dopamine system as intensely as the drug becomes the primary source of meaning and value. And so, and that really, what that does is it digs a hole, right? The person feels empty inside. And so their only recourse to feel good then is to take higher and higher doses of the drug to preserve a dwindling sense of well-being. But MORE is really designed to reverse this process. The concept is if we can teach people how to use mindfulness to savor natural, healthy pleasure, joy, and meaning in life, then this will reduce the pull of the drug and thereby decrease craving and addictive behavior. And that's really what we've seen in multiple studies now.
When you say mindfulness, like what, meditation, gratitude journaling, like what are some of the ways in which mindfulness comes into play here? Because I feel like this is a sometimes vague umbrella term.
Absolutely. So in MORE, we're teaching mindfulness meditation. So we begin by teaching patients how to focus their attention on the sensation of their breath going into the nostrils. So they're focusing attention on the breath, and as the mind is wandering, they're noticing and acknowledging and accepting wherever the mind is wandering. Then they're letting those wandering thoughts and feelings go, and they're returning their attention back to the breath. And that's the basic loop of mindfulness. So just rinse and repeat. Do that again and again and again. And what you're really doing is you're strengthening the mind's capacity for meta-awareness, the awareness of awareness. And then when you've developed this capacity with respect to savoring, now we're teaching people to turn that mindfulness and that meta-awareness towards the experience of natural, healthy pleasure, appreciating the good in life.
I always say that mindfulness stuff isn't for me, like as this narrative I tell about myself, but what you just described is something I do when I lay in bed, when the existential dread of the day sets in and it keeps me up. I just focus on the breath. I tell myself the thoughts will pass and revert back to focusing on the breath. And it helps me. So I guess this probably helps people. And the stats are kind of amazing, like 50% reduction of opioid craving for folks who use this technique. Is it really that good?
It definitely is. And not only have we shown that it reduces craving, but it directly reduces opioid misuse. So in a study we published a couple of years ago, a large clinical trial, we found that MORE reduced opioid misuse by 45% at a 9-month follow-up. So we're talking an 8-week therapy program, reducing addictive behavior by 45% 9 months later. And that was nearly triple the effect of standard group therapy.
Is this something people can do at home without guidance, or does it really require the help of a trained professional, like someone who's too busy or maybe can't afford therapy? What could they potentially do to help themselves if they find themselves struggling with addiction?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right now, the best way to get MORE is to find a therapist who is trained in this technique. But I think in the years to come, I think a MORE app might be a way to go to help bring this to people. But what could somebody do right now to help themselves? I think learning basics of mindfulness would be a great way to start. And there's plenty of mindfulness meditation resources out there on YouTube and other apps, etc. And then, in addition, really start paying attention to how can I reinvest my focus and my attention and my intention into the positive parts of my life, and make that a daily discipline practice.
The opioid epidemic, I feel like it's all often painted as hopeless, a crisis that we're in the media, but your work kind of offers this optimistic angle that people can relearn joy, move away from drugs. Having hope in the process, hope that you'll be able to change, do you think that impacts recovery?
I think so. I mean, one of the really kind of interesting frames for the opioid crisis is that epidemiologists have called the opioid crisis a disease of despair. And I really think that term, it's not just a catchy phrase, but I think it actually really speaks to what's happening in the brain that is propelling continued addictive behavior. And so what we've shown through multiple studies is that teaching people how to mindfully savor natural, healthy pleasure, joy, and meaning in life is actually a potent antidote to the disease of despair. And I think that's a beautiful message. I think it really is all about hope.
I do too. The technique is called MORE, or Mindfulness-Oriented Recovery Enhancement. I'm here with Dr. Eric Garland, a psychiatry professor at the University of California, San Diego. Eric, this was an interesting chat. Thanks for sharing your research with us and sharing the technique, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. Great to talk with you.
After the break, we'll look at how people flourish and get happier with age. Research says things get a little better as you grow older, but it depends on where you live, whether you had an odd childhood, and of course, how you define happiness. But what does it mean to flourish as we age? Stick around, you just might find out.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that makes you laugh, think, and occasionally uncomfortable. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Research says humans might actually get happier as they age, but there's a bit of complexity to this. It depends on where you live, whether you had a weird childhood, and of course, how you define happiness. So what does it mean to flourish as we age? Let's discuss with Brendan Case. He's from the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University. Brendan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be here.
The word flourishing, to me, is kind of vague. So what does it actually mean to flourish in our lives, and especially as we age?
It's a great question. We actually like the vagueness of the term at the Human Flourishing Program. We've started using it in preference to words like happiness, which we think people tend to bring a little more baggage to a term like happiness than they do to a word like flourishing. So we can it's an empty box that we can fill with our own content, basically. We define flourishing as a state in which all aspects of a person's life are good, including the context and communities in which that person lives. Now that obviously is a very broad definition. In our view, it covers at least 5 kind of major aspects of a person's life. So subjective well-being, meaning basically happiness, what people tend to mean by happiness, positive emotion, subjective life satisfaction, say, but also health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close relationships, and financial and material security as an important means to sustaining flourishing in all of those other domains over time.
Like, can we retire in old age and not have to worry about money as we age?
Yeah, exactly right. It's pretty hard to stay healthy or to sustain relationships, take care of your family if you don't have money to buy food, or to put a roof over your kid's head. So yeah, those things matter a lot for sure.
So your research starts to get into the complexity of this. Some countries seem to flourish more. Their aging population seems to flourish more, while others not so much. Like, what's going so right in Brazil and maybe not so right in, let's say, Poland?
Yeah, I mean, so there's different ways of thinking about this. And what you're referring to, of course, are findings from this major study whose first wave of results we've just published in the last week or so. The Global Flourishing Study is what it's called. And we've looked at about 100 different aspects of the lives of about 202,000 people in 22 countries around the world, including, as you mentioned, Brazil and Poland. What we're finding in most countries in the sample is that flourishing is increasing. This is self-reported flourishing, so you have to take all of this with a grain of salt. It's not self-interpreting. But people are self-reporting a higher degree of flourishing as they age across the sample as a whole, so across all 22 countries, and in most of those 22 countries taken individually. Now, what we might have expected to find a decade ago for most aspects of flourishing is that younger people would have been doing better, reporting higher scores than middle-aged people, and that we would find those scores rising again into old age. So the conventional wisdom for a long time was that happiness is U-shaped across the life course. So it's highest among younger and older people with a big dip in the middle. Middle-aged people are stressed by careers and by parenting and by aging parents, and all the other things that make that time of life stressful. And what we've seen in the last decade or so, and we've documented this, as have others in some other research, is that left-hand side of the U-curve among young people has been flattening. So young people's scores have been going down consistently in many areas of life. And there's been a lot of discussion in the last decade or so about the mental health crisis in particular among young people, especially in North America and Europe. And what we're finding is that those declines in well-being extend beyond mental health to take in things like happiness, things like meaning in life, even self-rated physical health. We're finding is actually increasing across the Global Flourishing Study sample as a whole. So the 18-year-olds are self-rating their physical health as worse than the 80-year-olds are.
Interesting.
Which is strange.
The common thing we might point at is like social media. Is that the common culprit, or is it more complex than that?
Yeah, it's almost certainly more complex than that. There are very few, with the exception of, plagues say. There's very few,
I remember one.
Yeah, right. We're familiar with this. There's very few misfortunes that strike human societies that have just one cause. It's almost always multifactorial. I do think there's a great deal of evidence that, especially high rates of social media and smartphone use are driving many aspects of the decline in well-being among young people. And this is not evidence that we can corroborate yet from the Global Flourishing study, but we will be in a position to look at that with the second and third waves of this study. I think that there's another factor which is related but not identical to this concern about technology is the declining role of childhood independence in a broad sense across much of the world this is a longer trend, but in the last 50 years or so. There's a psychologist at Boston College named Peter Gray who's done great work on this, pointing to the ways in which kids in the States, I'm sure this is true in Canada, used to disappear, for many hours of the day. They'd ride their bikes around the neighborhood.
Yes, my father mentions the unlocked doors and the hockey games on the streets, and
yes, exactly. So this is a thing, there are for some understandable reasons, this is much less common today. And as a parent of young kids, I feel the pressure as well, not to let my kids do this, in the way that I was able to, even as a kid. But there's again, I think a compelling set of evidence that this really does, on a long timeline, undermine kids' resilience, undermine kids' sense of self-confidence, and that this does have kind of spillover effects into other areas of life. So, and those are two factors. I think they're probably two most important, but those are by no means the only factors that might be relevant here.
One of the findings is people who had rough childhoods mostly flourished less as adults, except in Germany, which is an odd finding. I am curious what's happening there.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we do. To some extent, the evidence about childhood experiences is fairly intuitive, I would say. And what we did was we asked respondents in this study to reflect on aspects of their life at age 12. So these are all retrospective reports, which we then use to construct a kind of, we call it a synthetic baseline wave. But, we, assuming that they're reporting accurately, right? So again, take it with a grain of salt. What we find consistently is that people, who say they had good relationships with their parents, who say they weren't abused as kids, who say they were financially reasonably well off as kids, tend to report higher levels of flourishing in adulthood. It'd be shocking if that weren't true in general. We do find a couple of exceptions, and there's some quite interesting. The most interesting exception, I'll say, which we're still really puzzling over, is that across the sample as a whole, actually, so this is true in a number of countries, we find that self-reported experiences of childhood abuse or neglect actually predict higher degrees of volunteering in adulthood.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Well, you get the people who are recovering from drug addiction who then become drug addiction counselors.
Want to give back. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that might be part of it. Yeah, exactly right. And I think that, so this is not, obviously we're not treating that result as a recommendation for abusing kids to get them to volunteer more. But, we do think that this is, it's interesting evidence that in some cases, at least, and in some aspects of life, people really can experience growth in character, say, or in a sense of meaning on the far side of suffering. That doesn't make suffering good, but it does mean that, we really should lean into the possibility of growing as a result of it.
Real talk, if someone wants to flourish more today, this week, not in 20 years from now, what is a small thing they can do? No pressure. I'm just trying to save humanity with this question.
Yeah, right. Small thing, try to become more forgiving.
Ooh.
There's a lot of evidence that becoming a more forgiving person promotes many aspects of mental health, but also promotes meaning in life, improves relationships. And this is we have a workbook that you can use if you'd like to work on that.
Well, Brendan Case is from the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University. Brendan, where can people find out more about the program or your research or you?
If you Google the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University, you'll find us. The website is hfh.fas.harvard.edu. You could find me on that website as well. Yeah, and we have lots of resources there about how to flourish, and we do hope we want to get the word out about this. It's very important.
Brendan, thank you for your time.
Thanks, David.
All right, we'll get serious after the break with Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Our topic, Rebuilding your life after traumas. Things will get reflective, maybe a personal anecdote or two. You're not going to want to miss it. I am David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
When your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. We are joined by therapist, expert in family and marital therapy. What makes you an expert? I guess doing it for enough years. You do something long enough, they call you an expert. Gary Direnfeld, let me say your name before you start talking. Gary, welcome.
Great to be with you.
This week's topic, I think, is going to get a little bit serious. I was watching a movie. It was a Holocaust comedy. Now, before you get offended... It really was. It's a new movie by Jesse Eisenberg. It's called A Real Pain, and it's set in modern day. And two estranged cousins, their grandmother went to a concentration camp. She survived it. She got out. She emigrated to New York, and she died, but she wanted the kids to visit her home in Poland and the camp that she spent time in. And so They're kind of like comedic and funny. Their relationship's very silly and funny, but the weight of what they're doing is super heavy.
Is heavy. Well, listen, isn't that the way of Jewish comedians?
Yeah. So when I say it's a Holocaust comedy, I meant it's a silly genre. I think maybe this movie's the only one, but it's kind of like the movie. 1 minute you're laughing, and the other minute you're visiting a place where an atrocity happened.
And you're crying, yeah.
When you're crying. But that happened in the 40s and late 30s. There's a character in it who is a Rwandan guy, survived the Rwandan genocide, immigrated to... I think Alberta, maybe Edmonton, maybe Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg, somewhere in Canada. And he found himself a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, living in a small Jewish community, and he converted and became a member of the congregation. And he describes it as part of his way to rebuild his life after an atrocity, after a trauma.
Wow.
And that's where I'm getting this topic from, rebuilding your life after something substantial. Now, it doesn't have to be genocide. I mean, that's awful, but it could be divorce, could be a death, could be a bankruptcy, could be any major shakeup. There's got to be times in your life where you've seen people reduced to so little and then rebuild.
Yeah. And, the thing about trauma for some people is that they lose their sense of connection to other people. They lose their social network. So this fellow, according to the story you just gave us,
I mean, it's fiction, but the narrative rings true. Yeah,
I get it. He found his social network. He found his peeps, those with whom he could relate, and those who could relate to him, given some similarities of experience. And look, when we're getting over a trauma in and of itself can be so isolating. So to find your peeps, to find those who will get you, so to speak.
Yeah, he really was.
That's healing.
He was of African descent, this fictional character, but he was like the best Jew on the trip. He was the one who knew all the prayers. Like, he knew his stuff. I guess they make you study when you convert. But like, this might be more of a do as I say, not as I do segment, because I had a major life shakeup when my ex and I separated, when I got divorced.
Okay.
And I fell into substance abuse. I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, type 2 at the time. I was going through heavy mood swings. My friends were worried about me. It took me years, really, to kind of stabilize. So, but I didn't do it at first with the help of a therapist. I was kind of on my own during the beginning of it. Only when I went to see a therapist did I start the slow process of rebuilding and taking stock. And when you talk about not having community, when a major relationship ends, you find your friends are kind of like a community center.
Whose side are they on? Are you with me? Are you with the ex?
Yeah.
What if we're not a couple? Can we still be friends?
I did a bad job at it, Gary. I mean, I was in my mid-20s. I'm now 38. It was a long time ago, late 20s. But yeah, these are the topics I want to cover with you, and I want to learn things from you. Imagine you're taking a patient for the first time who's gone through something traumatic.
Horrendous.
Horrendous.
Yeah. Well, I listen, at the end of the day, that's pretty much the only reason somebody comes to the therapist. Whatever they're coming to the therapist for, typically it's traumatic for them. And they either can't manage it personally or interpersonally, in terms of their relationship with others. They want to, in a sense, get over it. And society tells you to get over it. And that's the wrong frame of reference. You don't get over it. You got to go through it.
Exactly. You got to integrate it.
I love that word.
It's like being on a boat and there's a storm ahead of you. The only way you're getting to the other side of that is going right through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And recently, I had someone get in touch with me. They said they still have the memories of the traumatic events despite all the therapy. And my reply was, well, of course you still have the memory. You're human. You have a brain. You won't lose the memory. However, where the therapy can be helpful is that memory no longer grips us and owns us. We own the memory. We can tolerate the memory.
It becomes a small piece as part of or a medium-sized piece, or even a large piece, but a piece nonetheless as part of
We can manage with the memory.
Let me get this word out, Gary. A piece as part of a wider, more complex whole is what I'm saying.
Yes. And, earlier you used the word integrate. Yeah, we do need to integrate these experiences into our lives. They're real. We do need to find our social group, our peeps, our PLUs, people like us, who get us, where I don't need to explain my mood and what triggered it because you get me. And there's a comfort and a safety in finding those people. That's why many therapists will recommend group therapy. It's not to embarrass the person to lay bare themselves in front of strangers. It's to find your peeps so that you can have that shared lived experience and talk about it and share your coping strategies and share what you can own it authentically.
I'm one of these people that kind of needs to go through things for myself. I'm really bad at taking advice. Even if 5 years later I arrive at what you told me 5 years ago, I need to figure it out for me. So I'm not sure I would have benefited from this advice. But had I realized that after my divorce and when I quit drinking and popping benzo Xanax pills, of course, that's all for parody purposes. I would never admit to doing a crime on a show. So what I'm saying right now isn't true, but just let's assume it was true for the purpose of this exercise. I don't want to get in trouble. So quite the preface there. But the idea of building community and the importance of it, the feelings of like loneliness that I had to deal with both when I cut out the drinking and when I dealt with this major fracture of my relationship, the act of community building that I eventually did after both those kind of events, one in my late 20s, one in my early 30s, that really is what helped me heal. But it took me a long time to realize that, to get that through my thick skull. And it's so weird to me because I got it through my thick skull after I separated with my ex. I realized community building would help me get through this, but I didn't realize that same pattern was there when I could quit drinking, that I needed to do it again.
Well, it's interesting. Those who drink, you have a community typically.
Yeah.
Sure, some people drink alone in isolation, but the vast majority of people drink with others and they have that community. Some people say, well, I can stop drinking and still have the same community. Maybe few are successful at that, quite frankly. Yet we still do need to find our peeps. That's where we get on with life.
I also want to talk when we come back from the break. We're here with Gary Direnfeld. It's Therapy Thursdays. On a Wednesday, we're talking rebuilding your life after traumatic events. I want to talk about one late night host who I think everyone loves, who went through something wild. When you hear about this, when you hear about what he went through as a young man, you're going to be shocked. So I'm going to tell you about this guy, and we'll kind of pick this apart, how people go through these things and rebuild after the break.
Part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. We are joined by Gary Direnfeld. Gary, welcome back. Thanks for talking to me today.
You know, I love what we do here on air. I just do.
I love you. Getting over, rebuilding your life, integrating with traumas after they'd happen. I want to talk about late night host Stephen Colbert. Because in 1974, this is not a widely publicized thing, although he has talked about it in various tell-all interviews. He doesn't really talk about it on a show, but when he's been interviewed about it, you know, sitting down, having a serious interview with someone else, he will talk about it. It's not a secret.
Okay.
So I'm not betraying a friend. I'm kidding. I obviously don't know him. You are the most famous person I know, Gary.
There's another good joke.
In 1974, Stephen Colbert's 10 years old. His dad and his two brothers are on a flight. The plane crashes.
Oh.
And he loses two of his brothers and his dad at 10.
Wow.
And his mom moves cities, rebuilds her life. I think opens up a bed and breakfast or something. I'm a little fuzzy on the details there. But this is someone who, I mean, I don't know what his private struggles were, but at least outwardly, we can never know really what someone's dealing with on the inside. But at least outwardly, this is someone who projects resilience.
Yeah, like he's got it together.
Yeah.
At least that's how he looks. I don't know him either.
But I'm sure you've dealt with clients, heard stories from other therapists about people who deal with these things and yet outwardly seem like they have their together, for lack of a better word.
And, you know, sometimes people do come to me, David, and they just, you know, they drop the problem in my lap, so to speak. Then I have to ask a lot of questions to get to know them. And I come to understand the adversity that they've overcome. And I don't know that I could make it through the adversities that I've heard of, that have been spoken to me. And I look at them, I tell these people, like, first of all, what you're going through is within likely the range of normal. You may not realize that because of these other experiences, and it triggers things for you. But I want you to know you're more resilient than you realize. And given what you've gone through, you're actually coping really well. And so to bring this kind of information to people, because people lose perspective on themselves and others, you know, the result of trauma. So sometimes that's all I'm going to bring is perspective that says, first of all, it's okay to be a little, use a Jewish word, vermished.
I don't know that one. What is that? Just in a mess?
Topsy-turvy, upset, a mess, given the experiences that you've lived through. And in the scheme of things, you're actually doing well. And what you're coping with now, reasonable. So sometimes we have to orient people through their trauma and give them credit. Just give them credit for what they've managed through. And for many, that alone offers peace and resilience.
For people that feel maybe they're not outwardly manifesting it, like maybe they seem like they have it together, but for people who feel broken, feel like they're in pieces, and they come to a therapist, what's day one advice? Or is that too general? You know, it's more specific to the individual.
Well, look, we have many examples of that, like, you know, Robin Williams, who took his life, people that you just wouldn't expect. And so outwardly, they look well, they look like they've got their act together. The fellow from Friends, whose name escapes me right now. So we do take very seriously when somebody comes to therapy who's had a trauma. We do know that there can be a remarkable difference between how one can put their facade together versus what's underneath it. And we always want to be mindful that that trauma may still be lurking and impactful.
If you take the Robin Williams example, I mean, this is a bright person that makes people happy.
Yeah.
Just on the facade. And you never know what people are going through.
Yeah. Matthew Perry.
Matthew Perry, yeah. I've been guilty of like thinking people are plain Jane normal, whatever. And then I hear from a friend the kinds of things they've gone through. And I'm like, whoa, you never know what people are going through.
Yeah. So as the therapist, sometimes we have to push a person and call BS on the facade and say, I hear you telling me things are good. Then why are we here? We wouldn't be here if things were as good as what you're telling me. There's stuff going on. Maybe you don't trust me yet. Maybe you're testing me. But I'm ready to dig in. And, the therapist has to be comfortable listening to people's traumas. People who've had trauma, they can sniff out the therapist that isn't comfortable. And then they worry about overwhelming the therapist. Then there's no therapy.
Yeah, it's a therapist's job to be overwhelmed. It's a price of business, I assume.
Or to not be overwhelmed, to have our own strategies in place to carry the weight of other people's burdens.
Let me restate. It's the therapist's job to occasionally receive overwhelming information.
That for sure. So we need to convey to those whom we treat, meet, see, whatever word you want, that we can take on their issues and not be overwhelmed, that we can manage them. And this is the first example of a new community. This, you went to therapy, David. You weren't ready to talk about it with anyone outside of therapy necessarily, but you form community with your therapist.
Yes, I suppose I tried stand-up out of desperation, and I found a community with the stand-up comics in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I started my first radio show, mostly interviewing stand-up comedians, because that's who I knew, and that's who would be willing to talk about their lives with me. Only later did I start working with kind of an extended group of individuals. And there kind of was a little community around my show and around doing stand-up at this open mic that I would host open mics at. At this venue I would host open mics at. And that helped me so much, like in 2015, 16.
Awesome.
After I'd separated from my ex.
So look, we're talking about trauma. If I were to leave some messages to our listeners.
Please do. Tie a bow in it. Wrap it up, Gary. I'm excited for this.
Trauma is isolating. We get stuck in our own pain and our own fears. We can relive that trauma. So we do need to form a community. And very often it starts with the therapist or a trusted individual. And I just want those folks who are having difficulty coping to reach out to someone trustworthy, just to say, this is a rough day. I just lived through the trauma of my mother's passing, medical assistance in death. And I've been quite open and frank. I have those folks who I've reached out on a more personal level, finding community, those people who get you, who may have had a similar experience, where you can feel safe and unpack the trauma.
I'm going to end with this and use your own advice against you, Gary. Advice you've given me before, but I think it's relevant here. If people are really struggling, you often say things like getting out of bed, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, going for a walk, your words, is enough. And so my takeaway is, if you're really struggling, I mean, this is generic struggling advice, but it's relevant here. Whatever small thing you can do that day to take care of yourself is a great thing.
Absolutely. If it starts with self-care, start there.
Gary, thank you for being here.
Love you. Love you, David.
Oh, he's so sweet. Gary Direnfeld is an expert in family and marital therapy. You can find him at yoursocialworker.com. And I felt like there was more to say there, but it's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday with our Thursday installment of Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday on the next Wednesday, right? Is that right? Did I get that right, Gary?
Oh my goodness. We'll need therapy for that.
After the break, the straight facts on mental health issues and gun ownership. This one gets spun a lot by pundits. And we live in a world with guns, whether we like it or not. So dive in with me in a few moments.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
3 years, public debate has drawn a straight line between mental illness and gun violence. Seems like something we say often, but a new study challenges that idea, the idea that mental illness drives gun ownership. Instead, it points to cultural and personal history as real influences in the United States. We are joined by this study's author to unpack what this means for gun policy and public perception around guns. Her name is Miranda Baumann. She's a forensic criminology researcher at Georgia State University. Miranda, first off, welcome to the show.
Hey, David. Thank you so much for having me.
Guns draw such extreme opinions from most people. But the reality of the situation is they're here in the United States. Where I'm from in Canada, they're also there. So it's important to look at them kind of neutrally. And I think mental health is something that comes into play when people discuss guns. Let's take a step back. Let's look at the headline. Why is it important to challenge this assumption that mental health illness drives gun ownership and carrying weapons?
It's a really good question. First, like you said, guns are everywhere. It's not going to change, at least not here in the US. But when we look at guns from a kind of a societal perspective, we look at them in kind of three ways. We say either it's normative or culturally appropriate, it's criminal, like people who are gang members using guns, or it's pathologic, because for some reason we assume that people with mental illnesses naturally have unhealthy relationships with firearms. You can see that in the way that every time we have mass casualty event shootings, that, mental illness is immediately what we go to in terms of explanations for what's driving that crime. And so we don't know that, though. We don't know if that's the case, right?
It's one of those weird cultural things where everyone says it and you just kind of believe it to be true because that's what the politicians and the news networks are saying. But yeah, I don't know that there is that link.
Right. And so, we have had very little research that has really kind of explored this relationship. There has been some that has come out that has challenged that direct relationship between, people with mental health problems having access to firearms and then that leading to gun-related crime. But even from a more basic standpoint, understanding what the symbolic meaning of firearms are for people with and without mental health problems, I think is an important first step in us understanding that it's all of us. It's not some folks have it different, some folks are, special with the way that they, have guns, and some people are scary with the way that they have guns. Maybe there's something to that, but until we really dive into it, you don't know.
What are some of the reasons people purchase firearms that aren't mental illness, or what are some of the reasons someone with mental illness would purchase them?
Well, so, there has been some prior research going back from like the 30s and 40s and 50s that kind of looked at what kind of explained firearm ownership in the United States, at least. And, a lot of this was cultural, things like what your religious affiliation was, what part of the country you were from, how you were raised, whether it was in an urban environment or a more hunting rural environment. And it's only really been in the last couple decades, since like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where we started seeing a shift in the way that guns were discussed in popular discourse. And it went from guns as methods for hunting and recreation, and instead it was guns for self-protection and guns as dangerous objects themselves. And so I think that's where we start kind of seeing this shift. And, as with all things, we kind of want an easy answer. We want something or someone to blame, and you have a population that's an easy target. And so I think that that's where some of the cultural assumptions I think come from. But we didn't really know, and so I thought it was important for us to kind of look at what really does explain ownership and access.
And so cultural background, whether you grew up with them, where you live, what the local attitudes are, that is a primary motivation for people to purchase firearms.
Well, I think it's
important to distinguish between the motivation for purchasing a firearm and what is associated with people who do own or have access to firearms, because we don't always have information that says, hey, why did you purchase this? So, for instance, what we saw in during the COVID pandemic was we saw a massive surge in the rate of first-time firearm buyers. Some of that may have been a function of cultural anxieties, or anxieties related to the pandemic. Some of it may have been people had a little extra cash in their pockets here in the United States. And so, because you had some extra cash, maybe I'm going to go buy that firearm I've been eyeing for a while, right?
Sure.
So it's not really necessarily clear why people will purchase or try to seek access. But sometimes it's easier for us to look at, people's backgrounds, their, characteristics themselves, and kind of look at it from that perspective to see, do we know what factors related to a person might help explain that?
Let's talk about mental health treatment. You found that receiving it actually was linked to lower rates of gun ownership. Why do you think that is? And what does that say about our public fear versus the kind of reality of the situation?
Well, I think that the first and foremost answer is the data that I utilized didn't have enough information to really dive into the nitty-gritty of that question. But given that, let me speculate a little.
Sure.
People who seek treatments are, engaging in the treatment process are probably going to be more likely to listen to their clinician, to be willing to give over access if they're in a position where they are not feeling that they are, mentally well enough to have firearms in terms of their own, danger for suicidal ideation. Or it may be that people who are more likely to engage in treatment are already going to be less likely to own firearms, potentially given the stigma that we have surrounding the relationship between mental illness and gun violence.
While reading a summary of your paper, I came across the term criminogenic disinhibition.
Yeah.
Does not roll off the tongue. Tell me about this and how it relates to firearm ownership.
It is a fancy way of looking at the role of risky behaviors and angry, impulsive personality traits. So it is the two different things that you look at. That angry impulsivity is that people who are quick to anger, quick to, rage. And then the risky behaviors, people always getting in trouble and not being able to stay out of trouble, that kind of impulsivity, which we see that are more behavioral and personality characteristics and not so much clinical characteristics. They're separate from that.
This is a group that them carrying firearms might be a risky thing to have around.
Yeah, especially when you're, a young adult whose brain isn't fully developed, you're more likely to be impulsive and potentially more likely to be angrily so.
One last thing. Your study found that people carry guns not out of some weird motivations, but just kind of because they have them. Is this a surprising finding that the reason someone might carry a gun on them at any given time is just a function of whether they own them or not?
Well, yes and no. So on the one hand, no, because in order to carry a firearm, you have to be able to have access to one, right? What I found really interesting was the strength of that relationship compared to the other things that were, I was examining. It was the strongest predictor of, carrying. It's far stronger than that angry impulsivity or that, risky behavior, right? Far more than even, your the socioeconomic and background characteristics that are still important. So I think it kind of is an interesting question about the role of, the presence of guns and the impact that has over and above all of these other things that kind of guide our behavior otherwise.
Miranda, I've enjoyed this relatively objective discussion, which is so hard to do these days, on firearm ownership and its relation to mental illness. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Miranda Baumann is a forensic criminology researcher at Georgia State University. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Check out The Last Show as a podcast. Head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. There you can find out info about the podcast and subscribe. Please, we're begging you. Although I can't tell you what to do. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow night. So I'm going to make like a guy who gets out of here and I'm going to get I'm going to get out of here. Good night. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.